So now you're at the place within your business that you have established a sales team and are beginning to see some initial traction from that team. And your mind is starting to consider the ongoing relationship with the customers. If it's not there, it should be. Because if you don't establish transactional trust with your customers, your sales efforts are going to fail. So stick with me as we go through these steps in building transactional trust, long-term loyalty with customers.
Welcome to the Launch Capsule. With your host, James DuBos. Buckle up because your launch capsule begins now.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome to this episode of the Launch Capsule. I'm Jim DuBos. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about establishing customer transactional trust. And the way to do that is through what is now referred to as customer experiences. Fundamentally, customers interact with us during a transactional lifespan, and there are key transactional touch points to ensure these seamless interactions. Because fundamentally, in the back of their minds, they are going to establish either a positive or negative experience with your company during this transactional process. And so what I want to do is walk through some key moments, touch point moments in a transaction that you can consider when and how you want to make a touch point to the customer so that you can generate a positive interaction. Because the goal for this is that the customer over the life, if they've had a more positive experience with our organization during the life of the transaction, it will be more likely that the customer will want to repeat that transaction in the future. Okay, so here we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is really what I call the inquiry or discovery phase. And this is generally a first contact phase, right? So either you reach out to the customer reaches out to you through a website, a phone call, an email, just to learn about you, right? So it's kind of this initial interaction. So the elements that allow you to elevate this inquiry and first contact phase are the following. First, ensure a quick response time. It might be live chat, it could be automated email replies, or just a well-trained inside sales or customer service team member that are initially responding to that inquiry. The second area on how to elevate during this inquiry phase is what I like to call educational content. This educational content might just be as simple as FAQs. It could be blog articles. It could be videos. In some of my prior companies, we used webinars that were educationally focused based on products and services that educated the customer for free. So we were delivering something of value for free to the customer to show them that we wanted to build the relationship through something of value, right? Which is education. And then lastly, it's this personalization. So the more personal that you can make the interactions with the individual or individual team members from the customer who are making this first inquiry, the more, I'll say, valued that customer is going to feel. So it's really critical that when you think about the processes that are standing behind your inquiry and discovery phase from a customer, how are you going to personalize it? What are these automations going to be versus when is a actual human being going to respond? So this is the first stage of the touch point, right? The first touch point of creating this positive transactional trust with a customer. The next major transactional touch point I want to talk about is what I refer to as the decision-making phase. Really, this is where you have quoting and ordering procurement taking place. So really, the customer is requesting a quote based upon the outcome that they're searching for, and they're going to compare options, and they're going to make fundamentally a purchase decision. So the question is, how do you elevate the transactional experience to build transactional trust during this decision making phase. First, offer instant or as quick as possible transparent pricing to the customer. In one of my early customer journeys, we picked up customers. We gained customers because we could turn around a quote really, really quickly and they were accurate. The ability to generate a customized quote for the customer based upon the specifics that they were asking for, doing that in a quality way, but in a high speed turnaround was also very valuable to customers. The second element, if you have the ability, is some form of flexible payment options, whether it's online payment capabilities, credit terms, financing. In many cases, the financing element is not even done by the entrepreneur or the business itself. You use a third party bank or financing partner to provide those payment structures for you. And there's plenty of really good options out there for that. So don't dismiss that because cash is important to customers. Lastly, it's streamlining this order process and approval process. So if you have some way to generate an online portal and dedicated sales rep support in the closing of the transaction, that can be a real benefit to you and the customer community. And lastly, I would just say in this decision-making phase, it's communications through the process. Be responsive and make it as personal as possible through this process of quoting an order decision, because the customer is making a core decision on how to expend their transaction capital, and they want to do that with someone that they feel like they can trust. So that is really the key moments in the what I call the decision making process. The third major transactional touch point is in what I refer to as the execution of service. And it's really the fulfillment and delivery after you've won the quotation, right? The customer's accepted your quote, and now you've entered into this execution phase against the products or services that you've been transacted to provide. So let's say the product is manufactured, it's packaged and shipped, and a service is to be delivered. So how do you elevate those elements? First, communicate proactively with real-time tracking if available and order updates. That's critical to a customer. They want to know where is their delivery in the pipeline. The second is really just as fast and accurate and reliable is the delivery with minimal errors, right? Nobody is perfect. No one, we're not machines, we're not robots, we're human beings, and mistakes can happen, but you want to limit those in as much as possible because those are going to be the negative moments that I talked about earlier. And then you want to make sure that they have kind of this, I like to call it unboxing experience, right? Where we've unboxed our initial Apple computer or Microsoft based device and it was packaged beautifully and we had this unboxing experience. Making sure the customer has as personal an experience as possible with the product or service that you deliver so that they feel like at the end of the journey, when everything's been delivered, the services have been rendered, they look and go, wow, those people really took care of me in a way that I wanted to be treated, right? So that good old golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. Help them have a very positive personal experience during this execution phase of the transaction. Okay, the fourth touch point in the transaction is going to be referred to as kind of customer care, whether that's post-sales support and follow-up. So the customer receives your product or service, and they may just need ongoing support and guidance after the delivery. So how do you elevate that? So a few things. First, simple things like thank you messages, feedback requests, personal outreach from your account managers can be really key at the beginning of this post-sale follow-up. The second might be easy access to troubleshooting support or warranty support during this transactional life with the customer. So how do you provide those services in an ongoing way? Does the customer feel like you sold them something and you disappeared? or do you feel like you're readily available to them during the life of the ownership of the product or service that you just sold to them? And then lastly, it's kind of like, how do you generate loyalty post-sale? So maybe it's a discount on a future purchase. Maybe you know that the product or service you sold them is going to have an ongoing life, meaning there are upgrades and updates that need to be made to the product or service that you rendered. Well, there's your opportunity to provide ongoing support and ongoing transactional support that are to the benefit of the customer. So all of this is really very personal because they've made an individual transaction to get a business outcome that they were looking for. And then the last touch point I'll mention is what I refer to as the ongoing relationship. And this is really focused on retention and advocacy from the customer. So at this moment, the customer is deciding, do I want to remain loyal to them as an organization? Am I willing to refer other business contacts to that organization? Or am I going to explore competition? So you really need to think about, now I'm entering into this phase of retention and advocacy. How do I elevate? So I think I encourage my entrepreneurs to focus on what I call the VIP customer experience. So whether it's access to early offers, ongoing education to known business issues that they may be having, I would encourage you as early as possible, as early as the customer is willing, to give you a review, to give you a testimonial, even to give you a case study. Because the earlier you capture that, the customers now put something in writing that they won't readily take away. They won't readily take it back unless you really mess up. So I think it's really important that the quicker you can get the testimonial, the positive review, you'll lead to referrals. And then ultimately, there's going to be recognition internally built from the customer back to your company. And then I think lastly here, you can keep the touch point high, what I call the engagement high in this ongoing relationship, whether that's a newsletter, maybe it's social media interactions, maybe it's ongoing industry insight, whatever your industry is, to help that customer feel like you're constantly thinking of them. So look, we've covered 5 primary touch point areas along the sales and transactional journey. By refining the touch points and building both automated and human interactions along these 5 major areas, you're going to create what I call a seamless and ultimately delightful experience for the customer. And it's going to build long-term retention and trust with the customer, because that's really what you're trying to do. At the end of any transactional journey, you want the customer to be able to look back and go, overall, that was a very positive experience. I know they have my best interests at heart, and I want to do this transaction again. I want to do another transaction with this company. That's fundamentally what you're looking for. And the second is you want them to be willing to refer you to a friend or an associate. Those 2 things are the key fundamental things for building long-term loyalty and customer advocacy with your company and your organization. So look, thanks a lot for listening to this. I hope it was helpful. Have an awesome day.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Launch Capsule. With your host and mentor to success, James DuBos. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and share.